celebration of Joe Docksey. Next to Francis Lamont Hinman, the founder of the Lamont School of Music, Joe is the most consequential director in the school's history. He invested decades of time, effort, passion, and love to this school, elevating it to a national stature and building a community he so proudly called his family. Working with Chancellor Dan Ritchie and being guided by the philanthropic leadership of Bob and Judy Newman, he was the visionary for this astonishing building, the Bob and Judy Newman Center for the Performing Arts. He also was a founder of the Denver Brass and was an exceptional touring artist in the Aries Brass Quintet. We have so much to celebrate in Joe Docksey. Today, we will see the many sides of Joe through voices from his family, Lamont, the Denver Brass, and others. Between testimonies, we will hear recordings by Joe, as well as live performances by the Denver Brass under the baton of Warrington. We will conclude with a reception in Joy Burns Plaza, where all of us can share thoughts and memories of Joe. So I now like to turn the program over to Joe's family.
Hello. For those of you who don't know me, I am the son of Frank Joseph Docksey III. I'm Frank Joseph Docksey IV. And this is Frank Joseph Docksey V. On behalf of my family, I am here to extend our heartfelt gratitude and thanks to the many people who have helped make this celebration of life for my dad. Keith Ward, Julie Ann Jordan, Angela Mitchell, Ian Wiseco, the entire Lamont School of Music staff, the Newman Center staff, Sarah Sachs, Diane Roth, Garrett Glass, and ushers, Kathy Brannigan, Becky Wilkins, Susan McCullough, and all the amazing Denver Brass musicians. Jim Fitz Randolph, and the Celtic Colorado Pipes and Drums, Paul Brooks, Alan Hood, Joseph Martin, Ricardo, Isnaola, and of course, all of you who have come to celebrate my dad. He would have loved to see all of you.
Docksey. I'm the middle-born. So was my dad. My dad was born on July 29th, 1947, to Frank Joseph Docksey Jr. and Billy Ray Docksey in Lansing, Michigan. He passed peacefully in his home on December 9th, 2023. He started playing trumpet in the 4th grade, and the story goes, which may be no surprise to any of you, that he played through the whole trumpet exercise book the first weekend, and announced he was going to be a trumpet player when he grew up. He was in honors bands and toured with a band in Mexico while still in high school. He attended Michigan State University, where he met his future wife, Nancy. During his college years, he toured the country with his best friend, Louis Fletcher, playing double trumpet recitals, which culminated at the Trumpet Symposium in Denver. He fell in love with Denver and vowed he would be back. After college, he enlisted in the Army, ultimately being stationed at West Point, and of course, he was in the band. Nancy went out to West Point to get him after she graduated from Michigan State, and they married in June 1972. They moved to Denver for Joe to get his master's degree at the Lamont School of Music. They then moved to Fargo, North Dakota, where he first taught trumpet and was director of the first trumpet at in the Fargo Moorhead Symphony. This is also where their first child was born. In the summers, he continued returning to Denver to play in the pit at the Central City Opera. Upon permanently returning to Denver, they had 2 more children, encouraged many family members to move to Denver, and created his lasting legacy, where he taught, motivated, and inspired all of us.
Hi. I'm Sarah, the first child, the oldest. I just wanted to start by thanking you again for everyone taking your Sunday to be here today to celebrate this man that we loved so much in this building that he loved so much. He would have been delighted to see this today, truly delighted. You guys are going to hear a lot about my dad as a musician and as an administrator, I'm sure, today. So I wanted to give you a little insight about what it was like to have him as a dad. Growing up, every morning for my entire childhood, I woke up to the sound of trumpet warm-ups. And that's not a joke, that's real. Sometimes it was painfully early, especially when I was a teenager. My mom actually told us that he took a trumpet with him on their honeymoon to stay in shape, and that's also not a joke. But there were also a lot of perks to being a child of such a busy musician. We spent our childhood at the ballet, at the opera, at the City Park Band concerts, and of course Denver Brass concerts, watching our dad from theater seats, waving at him down in the orchestra pits, and sitting on church radiators at St. John's Cathedral, listening to him play with the Aries Brass Quintet every Christmas Eve. But as busy as he was not an absent father. He was always coming to our performances as well. Choir concerts, plays. He didn't come to them all, but if it mattered to us, he made every effort to be there. I actually don't think he missed one of Joey's football games. Maybe one. He always found time for us, and when he wasn't spending time with us, he was doing things for us. When we were little, he built, and I'm not kidding, a massive playground in our backyard with a 25-foot slide that he actually got sheet metal to make and built this slide out of sheet metal, and it was the talk of the neighborhood, especially the neighborhood kids, and we thought it was the coolest thing in the world. He was a real hands-on dad. He bought a basketball hoop just so that we could be taught how to play horse. He couldn't believe we didn't know how to play horse. And he brought home baseball mitts to teach us to catch, and when we got really into roller skating, he straps skates on his feet. At home, there was always classical music playing, always. So I remember actually, when I was thinking about what to say, I was trying to think of things that I remembered so clearly about my dad, and I remember this like it was yesterday. I remember nearly falling over when Dad actually brought home our first rock album, and it was on a record, like a vinyl record, so this is actually going to age me a little bit, and you will never guess what it was, so I'm just going to tell you. It was We Are the World. And I know every lyric in that album, in that record. If you were lucky enough to know my dad when we moved to the country, then you not only knew him during his mustache years, which, total side note, I think of my dad in two parts. Mustache dad, who was my childhood dad, and non-mustache dad, who was my adult dad. I think when he shaved off his mustache when I was in my 20s, someone told him he looked 20 years younger. and we never saw the mustache again. But back to, you also knew him, if you knew him then when we moved to the country, you also knew him as a cowboy. And I know there are people here that remember his cowboy years. Big 10-gallon hats, bolo ties, belt buckles. We as children benefited from this obsession with horses. We got horses. We had horseback riding lessons, weekend rides to Daniel Park with Dad, and Tracy actually got a pony for Christmas, a real one, a real pony. Yeah, he was a cowboy for a better part of the decade. And then he got really into skiing, so we all got into skiing, and then he got really into boating, so we got into boating. His obsessions were infectious, but he loved those horses, animals in general. He always has had dogs. He fed the wild turkeys in our backyard. He had cats, birds, the parrot. I don't know if you guys know, the parrot whose bust sits in Hamilton Hall, Allegro was his name, and parrots live for 50, 60 years, maybe longer. Like they have a human lifespan. And my dad was given the parrot by my mother for his 50th birthday. And that parrot laughs like my dad. So we have since rehomed this parrot, but I like to think that somewhere, probably really close by, my dad is still laughing. My dad loved birthdays and all things Christmas. I think it was because he loved to give gifts so much. I think it was like a love language. And he was a doer. He wasn't one to let life pass him by. So if he wanted to do something, he did it. First, he over-researched it, and then he planned it for like forever. And then we ended up on these epic family vacations growing up, and as an adult, he made a point to plan vacations for our entire expanded family, making sure that every one of his grandchildren learned how to fish. That was very important. He was a huge sports fan, especially for Colorado teams, so us kids started a tradition of taking him to the Rockies game every Father's Day, and he loved that. And when we were really little, he had a penalty flag that he actually put in his back pocket, and he used to throw it at the TV during Broncos games, and he'd say, "Offsides, roughing the passer, throw the flag, ref." And then he'd turn to us children and say to one of us, "Go get my flag." And that's how we grew up watching football in our house. He had an affinity for red cars and power tools. He found he could never have enough flashlights, shoes, watches, or gadgets. So many gadgets. He loved technology. The lights in our house were all controlled by his phone and the color of those lights. And they would turn on and off on command. He even had our hot water heater at my parents' house controlled by an app. So if the water was too cold in the shower, he could turn it up on his phone. At Thanksgiving this year, our entire family was together, something we think we'll always be thankful for. And Dad told us a story. And most of us had heard it before, and most of you haven't. And I actually had this highlighted in my computer in yellow because I was going to decide on the day if I was going to tell it. I'm not sure he would be super happy about me telling it, but I like the story. And it illustrates a point, so I'm going to tell it, and he told it a lot better than I will ever tell it. But it was about a gig he had years ago, and I'm guessing 25 years ago. He'd gotten there early, of course, because if you knew my dad, then you knew that if he wasn't 30 minutes early, he was late. And he discovered upon setup that he'd forgotten his mouthpieces for his trumpets. And he had these special mouthpieces that are, just Dad's. And he left them at DU. So he jumped in his car, raced to DU to get them, came back, landed in the theater exactly 2 minutes late. And the conductor had already started the overture. And Side note, he couldn't believe that the conductor hadn't waited for him. But he'd already started. And the only way to get to the orchestra pit was down. The only way to get into it was by going through the crowd and then just like launching over the side. So he did that. He went down and he jumped over the side, and in the process of, he knocked over about a half a dozen folding chairs that were propped up in the orchestra pit trying to get to a seat. He said he was mortified. I mean, this has had to be like 25 years later, and he was still mortified. He said he was so embarrassed. But the conductor came up to him at intermission, and the conductor said, "Well, Joe, you sure do know how to make an entrance, don't you?" I love this story because after he passed, I couldn't make sense out of why he would leave us so early. He was doing really well. And it was very unexpected. But I kept coming back to the story, and it occurred to me that maybe he left us so early simply because he couldn't imagine being late. He would have liked to have been early, honestly, for whatever it is that comes next. And my dad was the kindest, goofiest, gentlest, most generous person I've ever known. And I have like 100 more adjectives, but I'm not gonna go on here. You can find me afterwards. He was authentically himself. We will miss his laugh, his quirky sense of humor, his magic tricks, and the love he gave us all. He was our dad. He was our hero. And he was one of our absolute most favorite people on earth. I will remember and cherish every second I had with him in my lifetime. And I know we all will. We love you, Dad. Me again. I just wanted to say Dad was proud of all of his grandkids. He never missed a dance performance of Fiona, my daughter, so she wanted to dance one last time for her papa.
was great. I'm Paul Brooks. I'm the early years boomer guy. What a profound honor to be able to say a few words about my longtime and dear friend, Joe Docksey. A teacher, a mentor, a pedagogue, a conductor, a builder. But above all, first and foremost, Joe Docksey was a superb musician. Joe and Nancy Docksey came to Denver in the fall of 1972, or early on in my extended stay as an undergraduate at Lamont. Joe arrived with considerable fanfare. Lee Burns, the director of bands at the time, told me there was an outstanding trumpet player coming in as his graduate assistant. I got to hear this firsthand, playing in ensembles with Joe. He soloed numerous times with the symphonic band. He performed Bach's Second Brandenburg Concerto flawlessly in a chamber orchestra concert. During a spring break band tour to the West Coast, we braved a 40-below night in scenic Winnemucca. Not the high point of the tour, I would add. We shared fun times in the hockey band, and we played together professionally in various local groups in addition. It was during the time Joe and I performed in the Central City Opera Orchestra that I learned to truly appreciate the artistry of his playing. My first season in the orchestra, Donizetti's Don Pasquale was on the playbill. My favorite aria in the opera was not an aria at all, but the trumpet solo at the beginning of the second act. In Joe's hands, a true aria in terms of passion, phrasing, and beautiful sound. My second season, Benjamin Britten's A Midsummer Night's Dream was programmed. An amazing musical fantasy, all the orchestra parts are challenging, but the trumpet part is a bona fide bear. Britten scored the part for trumpet in D, whatever that is. And some players would approach this daunting piece as an athletic event. Not Joe Docksey. He sang, sparkled, heralded, and soared, all effortlessly with a coloratura technique, phrasing, and range, and a bel canto sound that would take your breath away. I can still see the conductor, David Efron, grinning widely every time Joe would take flight. The same unwavering dedication to excellence in music performance was shiningly evident in every facet of Joe's life. That excellence as a teacher, conductor, director, planner, builder, husband, father, grandfather, and yes, excellence as a friend, lives vibrantly in Joe Docksey's legacy. Godspeed, Joe. Soar with your muses. I will miss you madly.
Hello, everyone. I'm Al Hood, and I just want to tell you all how incredibly privileged I feel to be talking about Joe Docksey and sharing all of your warmth, admiration, and love for our beloved Joe. I met Joe in 1999 in my interview for this job as professor of trumpet, and I didn't know what I was getting into. When I met Joe, he has a strong personality, almost like a strong silent type. He commanded like a certain respect from you. To be honest, I was intimidated when I first met him. And then I had to rehearse with the faculty brass quintet, and all of a sudden this virtuosic trumpet playing comes out, and I was just floored totally. And he was such a fearless leader, musically and otherwise. But later on in the interview process, we had our chat together, and he was so smiley and relaxed, and he was so excited to show me the blueprint plans for the new building that we're in today. You know, one can't talk about Joe Docksey without talking about his commitment and devotion to this beautiful Newman Center for the arts in the Lamont School of Music. All of us watch Joe work tirelessly, overseeing every single aspect of getting this building to the standards he thought it should be. And it just part of his great devotion to everything. He went way above and beyond the call of duty for that. Joe thoughtfully and methodically set Lamont on a trajectory to reach the status of one of the nation's finest music schools. And it wouldn't be enough that students would have exceptional coaching and musical training, but the students, faculty, and staff alike would be bathed in a culture of love, respect, compassion, and generosity. Everyone growing together in their sacred profession of music. Joe was everyone's mentor, father, and friend. And when students would ask, what should I call you? Joe was often heard to say, well, you can call me Professor if you want, or maybe even His Majesty. But I'm your #1 supporter and friend, and I'd just like you to call me Joe. And so it became just Joe around the Lamont School of Music. I couldn't possibly talk about Joe without talking a little bit about him as a musician. We played next to each other for years and years and years, hundreds of rehearsals and concerts and tours. He had an amazing sound, great projection, wonderful endurance, impeccable time, beautiful dynamics. And it's easy to be impressed by all the pyrotechnics he used to do on the piccolo trumpet and the higher horns. That's all amazing as that stands. But what really floored me, and I know my colleagues will agree with this, was how he could taper down a note to its most quiet whisper and still keep a beautiful round tone and stay in tune. That just amazed me every time I got to experience that. Just a little aside, everyone who knows Joe pretty well knows that he is a gadget guy, and he likes to get the perfect equipment for what he does. Well, when we were in the Denver Brass together, every concert series, I would come in with like a different mute, a new mute, and he wanted to try it, of course. And then next time he would have that mute. And then he brought in something, and next time I would have that thing. And this kept going on till one day Joe turned to me and said, I'm going to have to reduce your pay, I think, so you can't buy these items anymore because I just can't afford it. I wish I had the picture. I didn't get it here in time enough to get it in the queue up there. But if anyone wants to see it, I'll have it out in the lobby. And this is a picture of Joe and I. We're pointing at a moving truck in front of the building. And this was on the day that he was moving out of Lamont, both of his offices at Lamont. And somehow he found a moving company that had my name on it. They were called Al Hood, all one name, Al Hood Van Lines. And he just thought it would be great that he hired this company and then surprised me with it. And he came and got me in the building and took me outside, and he was just giddy like a schoolboy that he had found this moving company with my name. And the point I wanted to make here is that Joe had a penchant for making ordinary moments extraordinary. And this happened time and time again, I would see. So I'd like to conclude by thanking Nancy Docksey and the Docksey family and giving them our love and prayers. I want to thank Keith Ward for helping me arrange to be here and make this little talk. And on behalf of all of us at Lamont, past and present, we love you, Joe, and miss you dearly. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joseph Martin, but I'm here to share the thoughts of Ricardo Isnaola. He was an institution here for many years, head of the conservatory program and partnered with Joe. And unfortunately, he was planning to be here, and he wants to give his regrets, especially the family, that he couldn't be here, but he had some medical issues that prevented him from doing this. So I'm in the unfortunate position of actually trying to give you Ricardo's words. When he had entered a faculty meeting, it was huge. He was a bigger-than-life person. And I will do everything, Ricardo, to do honor to that. I will share this. I had a wonderful conversation with Ricardo this morning, and some things he wanted to share. When Joe was chosen as director, Ricardo was on the committee to give forward recommendation to the faculty about who they deemed would be the best successor. And Ricardo didn't pick Joe. Now, he wanted me to know. He said, I had so much respect for him as a musician, as a person, but we just hadn't seen what he would do as a leader. And so when the final vote came and Joe was chosen, he was not without a little bit of fear going into the boss when it became real clear that he was not on that side. And Joe just beamed and said to him, I look forward to proving you wrong at the nearest opportunity, and gave him a big hug. And Ricardo and he were just best friends ever since then. And Ricardo was a great partner in a time he was given the position of heading of the strategic committee to move Lamont to this place. And he just wanted to share what it meant, the friendship. And what Joe does for me and everybody is showing he believes in people and bring the best out of them. So, these are the words from Ricardo, and he writes to Nancy, to Kathy, and to Keith. Thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to honor my beloved friend one last time. With grieving love, Ricardo. It says, I write these words with sadness tinged with overpowering nostalgia for the man I greatly admired as musician and colleague and came to love as my friend and brother in arms in the common cause of transformation of his beloved alma mater, the Lamont School of Music. The essence, the ethos of the concept of alma mater, the nurturing mother, couldn't be better embodied than in Joe Docksey's relationship with the school, where he found his vocational cocoon and his life's path, first as a graduate student in the early 1970s, and then as professor since 1970, and lastly, perhaps inevitably, in his transcendental directorship from 1988 until his retirement in 2011. The unique rapport between Joe and Lamont, I believe, predestined him to be the indispensable, devoted son for the ailing mother Lamont had become by the time he was named director. His intimate, almost visceral awareness of the institution's history, traditions, strengths, and weaknesses guided his visionary rethinking of its destiny as one of excellence and splendor at a time when the official position about its future was truly bare-bones survival. This exuberance in his thinking was as natural to Joe, the administrator, as sublime musical phrasing was for Joe, the high-flying trumpeter. Indeed, his talents were integrated seamlessly by the power of a passion tempered by lucidity, high-level sentiment, and high-level intelligence in perfect balance alignment. Whether in his handling of the convoluted maneuvering of university politics, his masterful navigation of the intricacies of a complex new composition, his demonstration of the magical symbiosis of flesh and metal in proper embouchure, or his relishing with undeterred enthusiasm his daily grind as Lamont's helmsman, his enthusiasm and dedication were always palpable. Joe became director of the school a year before Dan Ritchie was named DU's chancellor. The timely confluence of these two personalities would prove to be synergistic and institutionally transformative. They were united in all probability by a common, though perhaps unacknowledged belief in what Dan Ritchie calls cowboy ethics. That is, the strong belief that through difficult circumstances, the pursuit of shared goals reshapes individuals into team members, partners, and allies, bonded by their complete confidence in the decency of their endeavor. No matter how large the ranch, and despite unavoidable conflicts and viewpoints, this idea holds true because of each other's honesty and integrity. By the early 90s, Joe's effervescent leadership had created a spirit of can-do optimism in the Lamont facility that opened the door to bold thinking that dared push programmatic boundaries and cross historically unbreachable lines. The success of the enterprise brought us back in 2002 to University Park after 16 years in exile. We found a new home where our programs continue to thrive. Trevorrow Hall and the Robert and Judy Newman Center for the Performing Arts establishes new standards of quality for academic performing arts facilities around the country, to no small extent because of Joe's vision. 2024 marks the 100th anniversary of the school's founding by the formidable Florence Lamont Hinman. Wishful thinking on my part imagines that throughout the year, the fanfares of Joe's beloved herald trumpets will fill the school's spaces in his honor and memory numerous times. The commemoration, though marred by his absence, is bittersweet for those of us who were blessed by his presence in our lives. We who served with Joe discovered in his aquiline features poetry, compassion, and a joyful sense of life. Behind the blinding luminosity of his blue eyes and the unguarded vulnerability of his laughter, we have enjoyed this loyalty. For him, friendship after family was a sacred privilege. For us, for me, he will forever remain the model of what enlightened leadership is. The capability to teach others how to look as if from a high cliff at the boundless horizon at the end of the ocean. With all sincerity, Ricardo Isneo.
Before moving on to the next part of the program, I have a special and surprise guest. Bob and Judy Newman were very close to Joe. Along with Dan Ritchie, they worked hand in glove with him in making this remarkable performing arts center a reality. A center that is home to Lamont, Newman Center Presents Artist Series, DU's theater department, and much more. This center has become a thriving hub, a significant destination of arts and culture in Denver. And I'm happy to say that Bob and Judy Newman are here today, and I'm delighted to invite Judy Newman to the stage.
Well, I enjoyed all the pictures of the family and some of the memories. And it reminded me of Joe's steely, beautiful blue eyes. And it was wonderful to see that some of the family members have those same eyes. I knew Joe was one of the founders of the Denver Brass because we were subscribers early on. But I really got to know Joe when I accepted the position of campaign chair for DU's new Performing Arts Center, housing the Lamont School of Music, of which Joe was the executive director. Joe was key in making this building happen since Lamont was housed in the old Colorado Women's College, which is now the Denver School of the Arts. He wanted to move Lamont to the DU campus to integrate both campuses, which was one of my reasons I accepted the position of the chair. He was so intent to make this project work that this project would be world-class, and even spent his free time to making it the best it could be. In case you don't know, there are several independent structures in this building with a common roof and side walls. This hall is one of them. There is a 1-foot space between the structures to assure that no sound can be transmitted among them. Every day when the workers left, Joe would walk the construction site and look at those spaces in between the structures to make sure the workers have not tossed cans, bottles, tools, whatever, into those spaces that could compromise the acoustics that he wanted. It was a labor of love. During rain, sleet, or snow, Joe was there until those spaces were secure. Perfect acoustics was a key factor in this construction. Now, he went to other performance centers at universities along with other committee members, And he incorporated the best ideas of each of those buildings into here. He was most proud of the virtual practice room, where students could set the acoustics and the technology that he loved into whatever performance hall, maybe they had an audition or they were hoping to play. He could make that virtual room sound like Carnegie Hall or Gates Hall or whatever. And they could play there and they could get the feeling of playing there and how it would sound. What a dream that must have been for all those students. When we were opening the first section, the Lamont School of Music, we talked about the ceremony, and I suggested using herald trumpets, as Alan was doing, and Joe said, we don't have herald trumpets, and they really are not necessary. Well, somehow we acquired some herald trumpets and for the opening, and we agreed to the herald trumpet for the opening. And it has become the start of each of the hall openings for Gates, Hamilton, Williams, the 5th, the 10th, and last year's 20th anniversary. I can't believe this is 20 years after all of that work and all of the love and attention. And it's been a boon for the community. I mean, we get so many wonderful positive comments by the artists that perform here, that it's one of the best venues in town. There's only been one negative comment I've ever heard, and that was the opening of Gates Hall and the reception, that it was too noisy in the lobby, and they should have put carpet. Well, okay. A side story. I went to a value engineering. Does everyone know what value engineering means? We're going to cut cost. And one of the things they were going to do is get rid of the marble floor in the lobby and put carpet. And I said, well, could you put the marble back if we decide we don't like the carpet? No, it's overdone because the subfloor has to be a little different. And said, okay, we're not doing carpet, we're doing marble. And that's what we did. And so it was really funny when the only comment that I have ever heard that's negative is we should have put carpet in there. So anyway, I thought it was money well spent, but who knows. As was mentioned, oh, and by the way, Alan is right. Joe did become a real fan of the herald trumpets, and I think he even played them himself once. Joe was a parrot lover, and we talked about Allegro. And his friends, his faculty, and other musicians knew that and gave Joe a statue of Allegro, and it is installed on the box he always sat on the balcony of Hamilton Hall. So whenever I see that, I think it's a memory of Joe, and he's there in the room watching the performance and enjoying them. Joe loved his music, his trumpet, Lamont, the Denver brass, his friends, but mostly his family. So rest in peace with perfect acoustics. We're taking care of the facility for you. Thank you.
Well, this got real in a hurry. I have to say, I really miss him. You know, as I'm sitting over there playing, trying to keep my head in the game, while I'm thinking, how am I going to keep my stuff together when I come over here and talk? I mean, I told Nancy and Kathy, I don't need to speak. I know how I feel about Joe. But if there's something I can contribute, I would be glad to do that. And as I'm standing here, fighting, keeping myself focused here, I have this sense of real gratitude. Nancy and Kathy give me a chance to say a couple things. It means a lot to me. So, as a teacher, as a performer, I think we all aspire to say something, to do something that's going to have some lasting impact, some inspirational and profound effect on the people that we touch. And to that, I truly can't think of anyone else in my life that's had a larger impact on me in my life as a performer and teacher than Joe Docksey. I mean, I could go on about decades of adventures. I mean, we could talk about everything from Joe and I crashing through the rainforest off trails looking for sloths in Costa Rica, to us getting tossed off of a train 250 miles from Moscow in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night because, how do I put this, Joe and a Russian train attendant couldn't come to an agreement about how Americans should be treated, to doing a photo opportunity with Aries in the early years where we all dressed up like a biker's gang because Joe had this idea that he was going to solicit an endorsement from Harley Davidson. I don't even... It had something to do with chrome and brass would go great together. And like so much, I just went along for the ride, and all for the betterment. I will say, I spent 10 years in academia as a student trying to learn how to play. And I did not really learn how to phrase or interpret music until I sat playing with Joe. I mean, at the one time, it was just a lifetime of trying to do this. At the end, it was really kind of simple. Whether Joe's playing Sussex Farmer's Carol or really anything, he would cherish and caress the beauty and anticipation of a musical line with such incredible effortlessness and fearlessness. And as a player, I felt that really gave me permission to try and find in myself that same truth, to be courageous and speak that. And then just the pressure of trying to balance out whether I'm playing trombone, timbre, brass, or an Aries, to find a way to balance off his musicality in the group and not be a dead spot when it gets my turn to play. This same fearlessness and commitment he demonstrated in everything he did. This building, I'm so glad that Judy Newman had a chance to speak. This was an extension of his love and commitment. And honestly, in those years, he was obsessed. I mean, everything. I was great seeing the pictures because Kathy and Joe and Al and I, and Susan, standing right here when it was under construction, wearing hard hats and playing concerts, or he and I decompressing after faculty meetings. It's all he talked about was the building. And I get it. There was so much enthusiasm, exciting for this new shining building and for returning home and all that, but I don't think I really understood exactly what he was doing, his enthusiasm, until later. And when I understood this building is an extension of his beliefs and dreams to make this place a truly special and remarkable institution. You know, I feel like he thought the world of Dan Ritchie. And I think he saw in Dan someone that he respected, someone that he understood, and someone that he could see as a partner in really realizing his dreams. And Joe would candidly talk to me about everything. And so he shared with me after a budget meeting, this is exactly what Judy was talking about. And Dan came up and said, we're over budget. We're a lot over budget, so a lot of these things have got to be cut. And I asked Joe, so what did you say? And he had this twinkle in his eye. And he said, well, I told Dan that I understand we have to make budget cuts. This will just simply be a mediocre place, an unremarkable institution that has no difference from any other school around the country, but we'll have made our budget, and that's what's important. And Dan's response was, fine, Joe, we'll just leave it. I'll find a way to get the money. And that's how he approached everything. It was just all vision and goals and excellence, and obstacles were unimportant. They were going to be overcome. You know, he was from a different era, and he took a lot of pride because he was a conductor, and he was bringing me as a conductor in this and mentoring me. And he shared with me a story about how he got this job of director of the School of Music. And at that time, the directors were always chosen from within the ranks. They came up from the faculty. And you can imagine the politicking back and forth, and people saying, well, there's an excellent musician, excellent leader. That person's been here for a long time. They'll be director. And it was pretty clear which way things were going. And then he shared that it was almost overnight. An epiphany hit him. This person would be good, but good is not good enough. And the only thing that would satisfy was his passion. And he shared it was almost overnight. He wrote this speech to the faculty that demonstrated his love for this institution and his commitment that he would give all that he is to making this a special place. And his sincerity and passion spoke to the faculty, and ultimately they chose him. And as I shared with Ricardo, and then he went to work and won everyone over. And I sit here and I've been struggling with this, thinking, you know, what do I need to share that would truly honor Nancy and Sarah, Tracy, and Joey in their memories? What would honor Kathy and all of his colleagues in Denver Brass and Lamont? And then I had a kind of comfort in thinking, what would Joe want to be said? And to that, I just was thinking, you know what? I've got in how I approach things this burn, this painful need in everything I'm doing to make Lamont a special place. I don't even know at this point in my life where Joe's encouragement of a culture ends and my own values begin. And to a certain extent, I think that's what he wanted. And as I think about what Joe would say, I can't help but think about the words of another of my great heroes saying, it is for us the living rather to be dedicated to that great task remaining before us, that we take increased devotion to that cause for which he gave the last full measure of devotion. I see the spirit of Joe in this school, in faculty and leadership that never had the opportunity to work under him. He's gone, but the culture persists. And perhaps we still need a reminder. When facing adversity, as Joe did, we need to be reminded to remain loyal to each other and to this great program, and be relentless in our dedication to these students and to Lamont as a unique place and a supportive community with an unyielding pursuit of excellence. Joe, I think about you often. I wish I could have said many of these things directly to him, but he's been a giant here, and it's my sincere honor to have the chance to just say a few things. Thank you.
I first met the bigger-than-life Joe with wife Nancy at West Point in 1972. 2 years later, we were both in Denver, where Joe was pursuing his master's degree at Lamont.
By 1982, Joe and I were both active Denver freelancers, and a lifetime best buddy friendship formed. My husband Chuck and I had started the Denver Brass in 1981, and a year later, Joe joined as both conductor and principal trumpeter. Joe was a magnificent conductor, but once he took control of the principal trumpet chair, we couldn't let him do anything but play principal trumpet. It was Joe who insisted from the very start that Denver Brass tackles substantive music worthy of contemplation by both the casual and the most discerning listener. Joe insisted that Denver Brass set itself apart from all other chamber groups through its ability to communicate soul-searching messages, and through its use of the full range of brass instruments, not just euphoniums and trombones and bass trombones, but especially trumpets in every imaginable key. Joe was also a production genius. We never got around to his idea of flying in an angel trumpeter here on Gates Stage. But we did realize his vision of having the Lamont Brass students rise up out of the Gates pit in a cloud of fog, joining the Denver Brass in Mars from the planets for our Space Odyssey show, and that was mighty special. And Denver Brass is who it is today because of Joe, and everything you hear, it just says and shouts to all of us, Joe, and we're going to keep it that way. It's really important to say that Joe's obsessions were never about Joe. He shuddered at the thought of bringing attention to himself. He would actually torpedo any attempts I made to make him the center of attention. And boy, we fought like cats and dogs over some of these issues, because I just couldn't imagine a lead trumpeter who didn't want to be in the spotlight. For those of us in the Aries Brass Quintet, a bond would form that is like no other. Touring the world brought us together as a family. Through Joe's mentoring, passing musical phrases to one another seemed as natural as simply taking a breath. And through the magic of music making, we became as one. Love and respect seeped into our being, and we all knew that neither time nor distance would ever change that. Joe's life mission was excellence, both in his personal musicianship and in everything he did. He wasn't satisfied with average, or even above average, because he lived life as though he had a sacred obligation to deliver the best. Joe knew that music wasn't just beautiful or fun. Joe knew that music was heaven sent and therefore demanded his awe. And on top of all of this, Joe never stopped giving. A favorite story of mine was when our quintet played a Christmas concert at an Alzheimer's home. A longtime Denver Brass fan was in the audience, lying in a bed with her eyes closed. At the end of the concert, Joe and I went to Charlotte, and taking her hand in his, Joe asked, "Did you like the music, Charlotte? We played it just for you." Charlotte opened her eyes and said, "I love you, Joe." God gives some people a burning desire to make the most of their gifts. They have a passion and drive that is indescribable. They must fulfill their life's mission. That was Joe. He didn't ask why or how much, he just did. He instinctively knew what needed to be done in the most challenging of times. People like Joe don't function in a vacuum. They have a significant other and a whole team behind them making all this possible. And so today we let Nancy and the entire family know how much we appreciate their support of all of Joe's endeavors. You made our Joe possible. Joe left us on his own terms without warning. It's hard on so many of us, wishing we had expressed to him our gratitude for the way he changed their lives. But I have a profound certainty that Joe is with us today, and he knows of our gratitude and love. Maybe it's because Joe always knew things before anyone else, and maybe it's because God made Joe a one-of-a-kind person. Thank you so much for being with us today.
A final side of Joe we present today is his service in the United States Army. If you are able, please stand for the playing of taps by David Artley and the presentation of the flag. Joseph Docksey. Husband, father, grandfather, artist, mentor, visionary, leader, teacher, friend. Nancy, while we mourn his passing with you and all of your family, we join you in celebrating Joe as the very special person he was and will always be. I want to thank everyone who has spoken today. And we also want to give all of you in the audience who have come today to share your thoughts and reminiscences with Nancy and the rest of the Docksey family. On the tables in the Joy Burns Plaza, you will find cards and pens. It says, share a memory, or words of love. If you are so moved, please write something and share with the Docksey family. Place your cards in the box you'll find on the table with memorabilia. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being part of our tribute and our celebration of such a very special person, Joe Docksey. I'll see you in